participation of the unemployed youth in the Namibian economic development. It's a very, very serious one. It's urgent, it's bread and butter issues, it's also very emotional. But I want to draw your attention to the preamble of our host tonight, the Youth Leadership Development Program's Alumni Association. There's a banner right here behind me that says it's here to promote unity among the Namibian youth, irrespective of political, social, and religious affiliation. And I want us to have that in mind as we have the discussion tonight. I want it to be as robust as possible. But at the same time as well, I want us to uphold those ideals. And those ideals come straight from the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia. We are, and I always say this whenever I speak at international platforms, we are one of those countries that are blessed with so much diversity, but it has not yet descended into chaos. We still have not had a civil war because of tribal issues, racism, or whatever the case might be. And we want to maintain it. And if I look into the room, there's quite a lot of influential young people in here that need to make sure that that is at the front of each and everything that they do, so that we can make sure that we maintain those ideals going forward. Not only a constitutional ideal, but also an organizational ideal. Many alumni of YLDP, of course, also present here. I see the likes of George Kambala, amongst the number. Why are you see now you're starting? Let him at least speak, and then we can have some reactions. But nonetheless, quite a lot of YLDP alumni that I see here themselves that have also become activists. In itself, proof that the program itself is working, and that's why we're sitting here for tonight.
Thank you, Ricardo. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm very pleased to welcome all of you, and I see there's a lot of interest in our today's dialogue. The answer to the question why youth engagement is such a crucial topic in a democracy is basically pretty easy to give in Namibia. The median age of 21.8 years. Namibia is a relatively young country, and this means that 50% of the population in Namibia are younger than 22 years. So at the same time, the youth employment rate, according to ILO figures, are between 35 and 40%. This means 35 to 40% between 15 and 24 years unemployed. Many of the young citizens in Namibia work in the informal sector. Unfortunately, these jobs are said to be insecure, and I think everyone knows that they are insecure. Due to several challenges, the workers in the informal sector lack protection and working at decent working conditions. And of course, the economic impact of COVID-19 of the last 2 years, 2.5 years, let us say, was very severe on the formal sector, but probably even more severe on the informal sector. We hope that with this event, we can lead to a better understanding of the requirements of governmental authorities on individuals for those young people who work in the informal sector. We would like to encourage young people within the informal sector as well to operate within these requirements. So I think I just highlighted already a gap which hopefully we can fill out in the next few 2 hours, maybe also afterwards. As a sociologist, I can say that there is worldwide empirical proof that opportunities to participate in the labor market are essential for social cohesion in every society worldwide. Together with the YLDP alumni, we as Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung would like to ignite tonight a constructive dialogue. So let me emphasize the term constructive dialogue again, as it is very important and probably the most important cornerstone, I think, of democracy. Today's event shall be a platform to create such a dialogue between policymakers and youth, especially those who are active in the informal economy. So we are looking forward to get a better understanding of the various perspectives tonight and to hear about suggestions to work on this issue. And I'm very curious about the next 2 hours. So welcome everyone and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Abhi. Many times, of course, we know that what is it that we want. We want good income, we want to take care of, we want to have a family, we want to raise that family in a safe environment, in a secure country. But many of that comes from having the right leadership in place. And it's important in terms of the work that the YLDP does, where it really imputes that need for responsibility, discipline, and taking action. And the alumni that's represented here, of course, is already an example of that. But I don't want to take the shine away. Please, a round of applause for EXCO member, Sibiso Moyo from YLDP Alumni.
I'd like to first thank everyone for coming. We, as the YLDP Alumni Association, we have come a long way through our partnership with FES Namibia. And as we sit here today, and if I would like to just speak necessarily on what informed the reason for this particular discussion. So in 2017, the African Union released what was called a policy document known as Harnessing the Demographic Dividends through Investments in the Youth. And in that policy document, what was seen was that we have close to over 63% of the African population being young people and the youth. And what is then striking in that particular policy document is that we realize that young people are also form part of the largest number of unemployed across the continent. And if we then bring it back to Namibia in itself, the African Peer Review Mechanism last year in 2021 released a report where it discussed that Namibia's unemployment current statistics stand at 36%, but it's more striking with the youth being around 41.6%. And that in itself is a very serious problem. So when we set as YLDP Alumni Association together with our partners, we thought, what is it that we need to discuss in this particular point in time? Having come from the 2.5 years of COVID-19 that have seriously affected a lot of people. People were retrenched, and a lot of people were unable to get jobs. And if we are to talk of development, and we are to talk of Vision 2030, we are to talk of industrialization, all these particular discussions, we need to look at the creation of employment and the ability for money to circulate around ourselves. And when we look at the events that have happened in the past 2 months, especially in terms of the hot seats that NAMRA has been put in, we also need to come into a full discussion actually across the region in terms of the importance of the informal sector. Because a lot of people that are unemployed find themselves in the informal sector. And we can never just sit and say to people that stay at home. And the informal sector also was brought into light by COVID-19 because the informal sector was part of the least protected sectors within the economy. And we do realize how the informal sector produces a lot of people that are able to put money for people to go to school, and the informal sector is very important within our economical environment. So today we are very happy to be graced by our wonderful panelists who are going to speak mostly on an institutional level in terms of unemployment and the contribution of unemployed youth. So it's not going to be from an uninstitutional level, it's from an institutional level, because institutions are very important, and the institutions inform how we are able to survive and how we are able to engage within the economic sector of our country. So I would like to ask all of you to listen with an open ear from all our diverse panelists. Our Member of Parliament, Mr. Maximalliant Katjimune.
The basis, I think, of the concept for tonight was the targeted review report on unemployment in Namibia by APRM, the African Peer Review Mechanism. They sit in the head of state's office, but they're a wing of the African Union. So they did a targeted report that really went on the ground to find out what are the statistics actually say. One of the most important ones for me is the fact that I think over 60% of Namibians are employed in the informal sector, compared to only around 40% that are in the formal sector. In a country where we have a high level of graduates now that are coming, particularly women, which also speaks to the success of some of these policies, it's a great concern. So what are these graduates doing? So you get a degree. The biggest under the employer, as we know, is the informal sector, agriculture being the biggest one. But agriculture's contribution to the GDP is only about 3%. So the 3% GDP contributor employs the most people in Namibia. And that is a stat that can never speak to the quality of life that we're going to have for young people in the country. I think there's someone that can put all of this in perspective for us. Honorable Maximalliant Katjimune is a former member of the leadership team at the University of Namibia. He's gone through youth leadership structures, YLDP renamed them, and recently, of course, joined the parliament as one of the youngest, took the record from patience. So the youngest member of parliament. It's a young man that we are always proud to listen to. He's very high level in the PDM secretariat, but I think also a voice of reason in general outside of political lines. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Before I start, I must correct some irregularities that you did. Because, in my opinion, it will constitute academic fraud if I don't do so. Myself and the Honorable Engari, I saw you. We are part of the 2019 Youth Leadership Development Program, but we unfortunately so I thought it would constitute academic fraud if I don't say that we did not graduate, unfortunately because of other commitments. It was an election year, we were all over the country, and we did not graduate. I humbly asked Mr. Delaney to organize for a supplementary. Yes, thank you very much, Ricardo. My task here this evening, in terms of the brief I got, is very simple. And it is contextualizing the debate of youth unemployment in terms of the Namibian legislature. And before I do that, me, I'm a politician. Following on the protocol that has already been established, I also want to recognize the beautiful lady in front of me, Honorable Yvette Arais, and also Honorable Shabin Chirare, seated right there. I saw Honorable Hengari and also Honorable Moto here, but I don't see them anymore. So my task is very simple, it's contextualizing the youth unemployment crisis in terms of what role must the legislature play. And the simple answer to that is quite simple actually. Because the legislature in terms of the Namibian constitution plays a very fundamental role because it is mandated with very inherent tasks in terms of our constitution. A number of provisions in the Namibian constitution are important to mention at this particular point in time. Article 44 of the Namibian constitution, which is perhaps the most important, tasks the National Assembly with a mandate, with express mandate, to make laws. Article 45 of the Namibian constitution states that and directs that members of the National Assembly must be the representative of all people, and that in the performance of their duties, they must take public interest into account. And there's no one who will deny that the youth unemployment crisis at this particular point in time constitutes public interest in terms of Article 45 of the Namibian Constitution. Not only Article 45 and 44 of the Constitution speaks to this, but then Article 95 of the Namibian Constitution further enjoins all members of the National Assembly in terms of protecting the welfare of all Namibians, and particularly the unemployed and so forth. So when one contextualizes all these all spheres, although we now have statistics that youth unemployment in particular is reaching around 60% at the end of 2021. However, even though we have these constitutional provisions that empower the National Assembly to deal decisively with issues such as youth unemployment, we have seen since 1990 that issues such as youth unemployment have often gotten the very least of attention in the National Assembly. In fact, records showing before the 2019 elections in the 7th Parliament show that, and even if you search for yourself in the records, there is very little mention of youth unemployment in terms of our legislature. There was never a motion passed in Parliament before the 7th Parliament which spoke expressly to youth unemployment and how to resolve it. Even though we saw that the numbers were quite becoming worrying, even from the 2010s, there was never an express motion in the National Assembly calling for this crisis to be addressed. So in fact, the first mention of the topic of youth unemployment only came during the 7th Parliament, when the Honorable Obiao Inaengari introduced the motion of youth unemployment in September 2021. That is the first time when we saw that the National Assembly is starting to take some sort of action in terms of the youth unemployment crisis. And I know that we are from different political party formations and so forth, but we must commend the role of the opposition, the role of parties such as the PDM and the LPM in putting young people at the fore in order to make the National Assembly realize that youth unemployment is actually a crisis, and it's a crisis that must be addressed at the toughest level, which is the National Assembly. So it is very also important in that same aspect to realize that why it's so important with young people in Parliament. Because before the 2019 elections and before the 7th Parliament, we had a very minimal representation of young people in Parliament. And it is only when we got 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 27-year-olds in the National Assembly did we finally get mention of the youth unemployment crisis in Parliament. And it's something that we must realize that it's actually so important to have young people in these spaces because they eventually impact policy at the highest level. So there is an imperative motion on the floor of the National Assembly which is calling for the National Assembly to address the issue of youth unemployment. And I hope it's currently on the floor of the National Assembly. It has been postponed to next week, Tuesday, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I hope we adopt this motion by next week, Tuesday, because it is an imperative motion that was tabled by the Honorable Yarukeekuro. Because this motion, amongst others, it calls for a number of interventions, but the most important intervention in terms of policy and in terms of legislation from that motion is that it's calling for a state of emergency to be declared on the youth unemployment crisis. So in terms of the legislature, and I don't want to be long because I had it's only 10 minutes.
I'm starting.
Yeah. So in terms of the legislature, what is now on the floor of the National Assembly is to make sure, is to proactively make sure that this motion on youth unemployment gets passed by the National Assembly so that we can practically impact the question of youth unemployment through the legislature. Because if you look at other records, you will find that there's actually no legislation in place to address the issue of unemployment. So for the first time in history, we have a motion on the floor of the National Assembly that must be passed so that we practically impact the issue of youth unemployment. However, I must caution that even though we pass a motion on youth unemployment through the National Assembly, there must be a concerted effort and political will from government to actually implement the recommendations of the motion. Because one issue that is lacking from the legislature, and I was working as a parliamentary researcher for 2 years, 2.5 years before I became a parliamentarian. One of the unfortunate issues that is lacking in our legislation is that parliamentary motions, unless they are taken seriously by government, actually have no force and effect. It's sort of an expression of interest. That's why you see many motions being passed, but we actually ask ourselves, what happens to this motion? So in terms of the youth unemployment motion that is on the floor, it has very progressive recommendations. They must be complemented by a government that is having a political will to actually implement the recommendations of this motion. Otherwise, it's going to be like any other white elephant motion, just like it goes there, you look nice on TV, okay, you pass the motion, you do not have it. So that is also a fundamental issue that we have been addressing at Parliament level. That look, we passed hundreds of motions on this floor. What happens to those motions? Really, I want to be very short because I hate long speeches. So that is the situation in terms of the legislature colleagues, and we'll engage much on many other issues. I don't want to go outside my mandate and start speaking about SMEs and whatnot. My mandate here was the situation in terms of the legislature. And I've lied to you that the legislature is well tasked in terms of the constitution to deal with these issues, that we have a motion on the floor to deal with the issue. But even if we pass the motion, government must come to the point proactively take part in terms of making sure that the recommendations are clear.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable, the moderator here, please don't speak very loud. It's just also a forewarning to my senior also here from Namibia, please. Let's limit the English a bit. Very important interventions being made so far with the position, and I think I like the fact that you went straight to the point around the issue of state of emergency. There are some questions that I want you to, of course, also think about as part of your contributions and probably later also unpack. I know when that came up, the biggest question was, why a state of emergency? We know, of course, when there's a disaster, for example, when there's a flood, the state of emergency allows government to now, it moves up on the priority list. You know the government budget takes about 3 years, midterm expenditure framework, so you have to plan for about 3 years before the money actually gets to the recipient. But with a state of emergency, we know usually in a disaster, for example, a flood or drought, all the agencies are now focused on directing resources towards dealing with that problem as a matter of priority. So perhaps later on in the conversation, Honorable can unpack for us how they see that state of emergency motion, mobilize some of the resources, and what are some of these areas that can become areas of immediate attention. The National Youth Council is the custodian, the primary voice of young people in Namibia through which they can express themselves. It's an active institution of an active parliament. All the young wings of the political parties are part of it. Community-based organizations, affiliates from different interest groups, whether it's in sexual and reproductive health rights, civic participation, whether it's business associations, all of them are part of the National Youth Council. So it puts them in a unique position to have the ear of not only the political leadership, but of course also the administrators within government structure. And the executive chairperson is here to speak on behalf of the NYC, but of course I think in general highlight some of the challenges faced by unemployment of youth in economic participation, and highlight some of the programs that the NYC is currently running to assist in terms of this challenge as well. Round of applause for Executive Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Ricardo, esteemed fellow panelists and young leaders, youth in front of me. I'm very honored to be invited by FES. Tonight I feel quite at home, not only because I'm a proud graduate, unlike Max. I'm a proud graduate of the YLDP program, but also there's so many youth leaders here tonight. That is a testament that NYC really does represent the young people, the young leaders in our country. I see so many of our national affiliates, and I really am happy that we have such a huge subscription and turnout tonight of young leaders that are interested in this topic. Mr. Moderator, for purposes of the conversation tonight, I want to briefly just touch on the National Youth Council, our mandate, what is it that we do. I then want to react on the theme that I've been given, which is the challenges faced by the unemployed youth in economic participation. And finally, I will react with regards to the interventions we offer, the solutions we offer as National Youth Council through our programming. I will then just elaborate on a few of the programs that we do, and hopefully after that, through Q&A, we can engage some more. Mr. Moderator, was established and constituted in 1994 as an autonomous umbrella body representing the needs, demands, and aspirations of youth in Namibia. In 2009, Parliament passed the National Youth Council Act number 3 of 2009 to provide for the establishment of the National Youth Council and for the establishment of the Youth Development Fund, management and administration of the Council. The National Youth Council strives towards the ultimate and national vision of freeing the Namibian youth from persistent underdevelopment by bettering our socio-economic, educational, cultural, and political disparities amongst the youth. Since 1994, the National Youth Council has engaged itself in commendable programming and projects geared towards youth advancement by working towards improving the role of youth organizations and individual young people in addressing our socio-economic, educational, cultural, and political disparities, be it in our constituencies, regions, and the country at large. The National Youth Council serves as a reference source for young people in Namibia in addressing the statutory powers and functions as translated into our mandate by the institution. Based on this, NYC's services have over the years evolved with the ever-changing needs and demands of the Namibian youth. In the end, necessitated the reformulation of our vision and mission as stipulated below. Currently, we really strive as the Youth Council to be a world-class youth development coordinating body. I want to really touch on the theme that I've been given here tonight by SES, which is the challenges faced by unemployed youth in economic participation. Before proceeding, it is important to make clear what economic participation is in this context, in as far as public administration and governance is concerned. Economic participation refers to an individual's engagement in work or education, their access to economic resources that results from such participation, and subsequently their financial health and social well-being provided by such access. So the question of what challenges are faced by unemployed youth in economic participation is really a question of what factors contribute to the staggering high rates of youth unemployment in this country, which was alluded to by my previous speakers. Of course, a good place to start is the country's present economic environment, the rate at which SMEs are growing and creating more employment, the rate at which youth-led businesses are opening up and operating with success. We need to ensure that to grow the SME space, we must be able to create a conducive environment. And I think that really speaks to policy of which Honorable Max and our legislators are responsible of. Some of our engagements with young people as the National Youth Council have also brought to light that some of our unemployed youth continue to be excluded from economic participation due to skills mismatch or skills redundancy. And I'll give you examples of how we have arrived at this conclusion. This is especially true for commerce graduates, where the industry is in constant motion and where new technologies continue to replace one's human labor. For example, 20 years ago, the cost of digital bookkeeping was so high that processes was mostly manual and analog. This means there was a demand for human resources. Today, accounting software has replaced the need for that human labor. Whereas a young accountant can download a software, for instance, that used to do the work of 10 or 15 accountants. So really, one can then see that how the digital evolution has also taken place. There has been a burden on the kind of skills that we provide through our educational system. I therefore want to then move on slightly to our programming and solutions that we as an institution created by government offer in as far as economic participation is concerned. The National Youth Council, because we're a public institution created by a law of parliament, are funded by government. Our income is through a government subsidy. The National Youth Council, for your information, fellow youth that perhaps are not too exposed to our work and activities, fall under the Ministry of Sport, Youth, National Service. We received a subsidy from government for the current financial year. We received a subsidy of 18 million, of which we need to pay salaries and wages. We need to maintain overhead expenses, and of which, in line with the thematic areas that we developed in the council. For this current financial year, the leadership of the National Youth Council of that has targeted an investment of close to 8 million just on programming that we want to implement. This programming, again, like I've said, is also thematic. We've got programming under the youth engagement and participation. Under that, we celebrate statutory obligations through our act. For instance, the National Youth Week. We convene a representative council meeting. Through this, we also have support to national youth dialogues, both international and local. We've got, under the youth empowerment projects, of which the 8 million, of course, there is finance from, entrepreneurship and development programs. Under that, the National Youth Council has a program called Credit for Youth in Business, CYB for short. We've got the Youth Development Grants Program. Under this program, we have a program called the Equipment and Grant Scheme, where the National Youth Council supports existing young entrepreneurs by expanding on their equipment through a subsidy or grant that they receive from the National Youth Council. Under the Entrepreneurship Development Programs, we've got the Agribusiness Initiative, where we have greenhouses set up countrywide in all 14 regions, where we have young entrepreneurs running these greenhouses for a year, and then the intention is that they need to exit this program and then become a mentor for new intakes to run these greenhouses. With these greenhouses, the young entrepreneurs have the ability to offtake local produce or vegetables into the market and sell it. Under the Entrepreneurship Development Program, again, it is still one project vote, of which we've got different programs. We also have a charcoal and mushroom project, which we are running in conjunction with our line ministry. That is linked to entrepreneurship development. We also have programs that are linked to capacity development, of which our coordinator is here, Ms. Eleni Henguba, where we focus really on soft skills that our young people need. For instance, YLDP was such a program, thank you, Mr. Moderator, of which many of us have benefited from. So really that is our solution that we offer at the National Youth Council. We've got programs that are linked to thematic areas, and I'm very happy today to say that in as much as we found programs at the National Youth Council with a new leadership, we are also looking at how to implement new programs, because I think really that is also the measure of leadership, to leave an institution better than what we have found it. So currently we know that there's a focus on shifting our work as an institution. It cannot be business as usual. We cannot convene workshops when we know that our young people are unemployed. So really the focus of us as a leadership currently in the institution is to lean towards creating income generating programming, where we have direct empowerment that creates either employment or ensure that a young person is better off with enabling interventions that we offer. And really that is our focus as the current leadership. And I think it speaks to how the institution will become more responsive and relevant in the current contemporary context that we are finding ourselves. So really at a glance, this is who we are as an institution. Mr. Moderator, I'm sure that I will have a lot of questions, but I look forward to those when we get into the Q&A. Thank you so much.
So you can see that the EC is quite experienced when it comes to public speaking.
Yeah.
There's quite a number of items, I think questions that are coming in our two WhatsApp messages so far. I would like to refer, I know that there are people in the room that know me personally, but can we reserve the questions for the conversation to the platforms, the public platforms, so that others can also get an opportunity to enrich. The Montevideo Convention of 1933 laid out so the easy you're supposed to finish now. It laid out 4 requirements or criteria for the recognition of a state as we know it. One of them is a defined population. The other one is to recognize the defined boundaries, so that these are the boundaries that this is Namibia. And then we have a recognized government. No matter how good they are, no matter how useless they are, we say, no, that is a member of parliament, and you recognize the office that they have. Important ones that have been used also for a lot of these international criminal courts and so forth is how do we prove that use cogents? And usually the first one that comes up is the revenue collection. So if you go to court, to international court, to have your state recognized, one of the things that you must prove is that there's a body that collects the taxes on behalf of the state as we know it. It is a concept as old as the Roman Empire. I think even in the Bible it gets mentioned. To give to Caesar what is due to Caesar. I think that my Christian colleagues will know the right terminologies to use. But I just wanted to highlight the importance of the Namibia Revenue Agency in what we know as the life of the state. And what came up now over the last 2 months, of course, and some of the activities that took place have also landed, I think, 2 young activists in prison as well. The wheels of justice are turning to deal with that. But it just really points out to the importance and the urgency chatting about some of these issues. And I think that it's a good thing that some of these things took place, the headlines in the papers, etc., so that we can just highlight, really understand the role of NAMRA, and see perhaps, of course, also what are some of the benefits that they could have for small and medium enterprises. As I just mentioned a bit earlier on, over 60% of the population is employed in the informal sector. So represented by the Strategic Communications Executive, please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Yarukeekuro Ndorokaze.
My name is Yarukeekuro Ndorokaze. Tonight, of course, I'm representing the Namibia Revenue Agency. But I come from a little village called Oruwa. It's in the Mitoto area of the great Oshubandipa region. Of course, I stand by the protocol as observed. But I think I should deliberately just particularly highlight and send a specific greeting to the young and new honorable members in our midst. Honorable Katjimune, Honorable Shirare, Honorable Arise. I'm told Honorable Motu and Hengari are also here. I actually wanted to see Honorable Hengari. The young people would know because of the video clip that was circulating. And I guess even when you've got young people in leadership, they'll do that with a bit of swag. And I just wanted to see her so that I can say it's good having young people in leadership positions because the future belongs to young people. I also saw my brother, the former mayor of our beautiful city, Mwete Kalapwa. I'm seeing a very good representative of men from Oshakapuo peer group, which is a peer initiation group. Younger men, but who are raising young people now. And they should be part of a conversation like this one. I'm also seeing feminine youth. Apparently some people are feminine. We recognize them and thank them for being part of the conversation. Now, obviously, you are told that I'm representing the Namibia Revenue Agency, an entity that I proudly represent because of the assignment that I signed up for. But what the moderator has also not indicated is that part of why I think I was invited is because I'm a young person myself as well. I'm aging now, and I'm advancing in age. But I'm a young person, but I think particularly because of the interest that I have in the development of young people. In my own time, those that I relate to will tell you that there's a lot of interest as far as youth development is concerned. So for me, it's not just a topic where I represent an entity and I need to state what the entity's position is. Of course, an assignment that I intend to do without doing this evening, but it's because it's a subject that I consider very dear. Now, the Namibia Revenue, and for context, we all talk about the Namibia Revenue Agency, but then you realize that not all is known as to why it even exists, what is it established to do, and what role is it going to play in the development. The Revenue Agency, we refer to it as NAMRA. Other people call us the guys with the orange suits and the orange ties and the navy blue suits. That entity was established following the proclamation of the Namibia Revenue Act 12 of 2017, and it started operational, or became operational on the 7th of April last year. So it has only been about 15 months in operation since then. It was established to, in the main, administer our revenue and customs law. So what we are responsible for is the administration of the Income Tax Act, the Value Added Tax, the Customs and Excise Act, Stamp Duty Act, the Transfer Duty Act, all of those nice legislations that our legislature has passed. And our vision as an entity, we aspire to become a world-class revenue agency, serving with particular and specific passion to positively impact the livelihoods of every Namibian. It is key to the development of this nation because it is entrusted with the collection of revenue. Anything that our government can think of doing, if it does not have revenue or to carry out those projects, initiatives, and programs, it will not help. It's not going to happen. So we are at the center of that. And I think with the establishment of the Namibia Revenue Agency, the older members of parliament will obviously tell us, because it's through them that the law that established this entity passed. It was really to ensure that there would be efficiency in the collection of revenue for the state. What does that give? It automatically gives the state latitude. Latitude to the effect that it is now able, assuming the revenue collected has increased, it has now gotten latitude to carry out those projects that it would have wanted to carry out. And I think youth employment and ensuring that the youth are occupied is one of those that should be priorities for any government, and I don't think it's any different for our government. So once revenue collection improves, it gives the government that space, and that is why we are so important. And when people are talking to us about our stakeholders, we tell them our stakeholder population or universe is so wide that we speak to you, we deal with you, whether directly or indirectly at any point. Whether it's through your income tax for those that are employed and that generate income that makes them qualified to pay income tax, or it's through the goods that you buy from the shops through value-added tax. When you're buying property, transfer duties, and the like, we deal with each other. When you are leaving this country or entering this country, the first set of people that you speak to would be your immigration officials. The next set of people that you'll be speaking to would be our officials, our customs officials, talking to you about what you have in your possession, what you intend to bring into the country. And I think this is where the crux of my and our representation and participation into this evening's program really stems from. But I'll get to that in a moment. Now, the question really before us is, how does the legal framework accommodate cross-border traders within the informal sector? That's the question that we were asked to deal with. And the answer to that is simple. Because the tax administration regime or space that we operate from does not discriminate. It has no regard for in which sector are you operating. If you take the Income Tax Act, it will not matter what you do. For as long as you derive income from a Namibian source, and your income is within the threshold, at the moment the threshold is 50,000 over a period of 12 months, it will not matter what you do. For as long as you meet that threshold, you should be paying tax. So they would not be saying, if you are a farmer, if you are an employed, you are a teacher, you are a lawyer, running your own firm, it would not matter. But as long as you earn an income over a period of 50,000 from a Namibian source, you should be paying tax, of course, depending on which bracket you then find yourself in. In relation to the Customs and Excise Act, it's the same. It would not matter what it is that you do. There are requirements. For instance, if you were to import things, when you are importing things for your own use, the limitation is there, the value that it must not exceed 5,000. And that's over a period of 1 year. Because it's for personal use. If you're saying it's for personal use. The moment that you go beyond that, then the applicable rates will then apply. So the answer is yes, it does accommodate because it does not discriminate. I'm not told this, but I get a sense that the real reason why we were invited to this conversation, because we have a significant role to play in the Namibian economy, and if there is a discussion around developing the economy, we obviously an interested party as the Namibia Revenue Agency. But I guess part of the reason why we were invited to this conversation this evening is because of the events of the 10th of May. Yes. But it's not because of the events of the 12th of May. It's because of the narrative that was then driven as a result of the events of the 10th of May. Because the moment that I'm done explaining, you would realize that the narrative that people are going with is far removed from what happened. On the 10th of May, like we would have done in any other occasion, and what the Customs and Excise Department Directorate at the time would have done so many times, and our records have a plethora of those distractions being done. We would have had things in our possession, counterfeit goods, confirmed as counterfeit goods, and counterfeit goods in terms of the law, the Customs and Excise Act, supported by other international instruments, are prohibited goods into this country. So they should never be brought into this country. We had those in some instances for as long back as 2015, 7 years or so. The last operation which formed part of those goods that were destroyed on the 10th of May were confiscated last year, August last year. So these goods, following a due process, and what does the due process entail? It entails that once on a suspicion that the customs officials have that this might be counterfeited, they would then seize these goods. And after seizing them, they would then engage the people that they think are the brand right holders to confirm that indeed this is your brand that appears to have been counterfeited. In which instance, the brand right holder would then say, no, it's my brand, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In which instance, you then release the goods to the person from whom you confiscated. In the alternative, the brand right holder would then say, yes, indeed, it's my product, it's my brand that has been counterfeited. And once that has been done and confirmation has been made, the only way that you deal with counterfeit and prohibited goods, it could extend to drugs, it could extend to all the so many other things, is you destroy them. So that's what we did on the 10th of May. Nothing wrong with what we did on the 10th. However, for whatever reason, and I do not want to get into the business of speculating, but I can speculate. But for whatever reason, there were several unfortunate narratives that were driven. One was the goods that were destroyed belonged to Namibians. Namibia Revenue Agency, for whatever reason, is targeting Namibians. And like I said, it's unfortunate because when you look at the goods that were destroyed, about 90% of them belong to foreigners. Now, if you had that fact or those facts, why would you run with a narrative like that? Here's another narrative. The goods that were destroyed on the 10th of May belong to young, unemployed people who are operating from a space called Border with Me. Therefore, Namra is so heartless, he does not even, it has no appreciation for the plight of young people. In the economic hardships that we are enduring, how could they? And again, when you look at who are the people from whom these goods were confiscated from, you would realize that such a narrative couldn't have been further from the truth. But what we have never asked is, if Namra is saying these are the facts around us, who then came up with this narrative? Where's the basis for this narrative? Who said it belonged to Namibians if the fact shows that it does not belong to Namibians? Who said it was taken from people operating from the space known as Border with Me if Namra is saying it? At least if we are lying, present us with alternative facts so that you can say that these guys they are talking things we don't understand what is the basis for it. But that has never been challenged. Nobody has bothered to ask, even you media operators that are reporting on this, where are your sources? Who gave you this information? That was not asked. So, as I retire, and I think I would have possibly exhausted the initial time given to me, is to say, just to reiterate the point that I made, the activity you do does not matter. The rules do not discriminate as to where you are operating. So yes, and when we are as part of our mandate, one of our key mandates is to ensure that in whatever we do, we facilitate trade and legitimate trade. And because we operate at the entry points, this is at which point that we must ensure that we are able to facilitate trade. So how do we do this? Could be to ensure that our processes are not cumbersome, and when people want to trade goods between the countries, we are able to do so, and serious work is underway with regards to ensuring that that happens. The other one could be the process should not only be not cumbersome, they should also be known to those that would aspire to trade between countries, and that is an activity that we undertake through our education initiatives. And if there is anything that the Namibia Revenue Agency has consistently done over the last 12 months or so, was stakeholder engagement and taxpayer and trader education. We've been deliberate about that to the extent that we've been to major parts of this country, if not to all the regions of this country. Yet there are 2 regions in the north that we still need to get to, but the rest of the country we can tell you that. And it's really taking that message to make it very easy. Because we know once people really appreciate what their obligations are, whether it's in relation to tax or it's in relation to customs and excise, we think the natural result or consequence of that would be compliance. And there is a need for us to enhance compliance. Because when you look at the tax compliance, at the moment, the indications are, it stands at around 42, 52, 57%. And this would be compliant, and compliance for us is when you are able to submit your documents on time and pay over the right amount of tax. Now, this is in relation to people that are on our system. We are not oblivious to the fact that there are so many people that are not within, I guess that's my indication to round off. There are so many other people that are not within the tax system, and therefore the burden on paying tax is not spread across. And this is really something that we're deliberately going to work, ensuring that we're able to carry. In relation to customs and excise, related to goods leaving and coming into the country, their compliance is also not what it should be. Indications, as far as being concerned, is around 63% or what. But we want to push it to further levels. So really, our idea is to ensure that we are able to have processes that are effective and are able to support legitimate trade between countries and within the countries. I think I should end my initial intervention here, but I'll be available to any other questions, whether it relates to the Namibia Revenue Agency, which is what I'm primarily representing, but as a senior, looking at the panel, I'm the most senior youth leader. So as a senior, I also remain concerned around the side of youth, and I don't mind participating further. Thank you.
You know, sometimes, I'm so proud when I see some of the products that came out of the Namibia Broadcasting Corporation, and some of the executives that will be, spending time within not only the public spaces but also in private sectors. So that's a good thing for the country. Let's get right to the crux of the matter. The conversation tonight is to give you a platform for you to ask these questions. So I'm going to open up the Q&A session for now. I just want to remind you once again of the preamble to promote unity amongst young people and to make sure that we also prove the others wrong, that we are able to conduct ourselves in a professional manner, in a constructive manner, when it comes to dealing with some of our challenges.
Good evening. My name is Ellison Sidana, and I'm a senior youth. Oh, louder. Okay, thanks to all the panelists. But my question goes directly to Honorable Katjimune with regards to legislation and how that can bring about any meaningful change. Our country is very notorious for legislating for things and not budgeting for them. A case in point is the Whistleblowers Protection Act. It was passed, and then you would hear that there is no money to protect whistleblowers. So you spoke about discussions that are before Parliament to declare youth unemployment a crisis or an emergency, and then probably do something about that in terms of legislation. But we know that the country is broke. The national debt ratio is hovering around 75%, meaning that for every $100 that we produce, $75 is not ours. So if you do not have the fiscal space or latitude to implement all those mobile ideas...
15 seconds, Dr. Chirali?
Huh?
15 seconds.
Okay, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So your question is what we want to pass, but
principles of state policy, for example, mandate the state to bring about all these good things, welfare of the people and the like. And then at one point there is a particular clause or article in the Constitution that says only within the confines of available resources. So it then kind of abrogates the state from that responsibility, doesn't it? So
I think we have.
Yeah, I think you have the gist of what I'm trying
Article
to get.
95, Principles of State Policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Mr. Anania Shilongo. I am a student leader at the University of Namibia. I am from Kolene region. My question is directed to Ms. Sharonice. Sorry if I may pronounce your name wrong. Okay, sorry.
Well, just easy. Your time is going.
All right. Since you are the body that represents the Namibian youth, my question is, you have mentioned something like you give opportunities and other initiatives to the 14 regions to benefit the youth. So my question is, we are aware that such resources are working to the detriment of the youth. Is there any modalities that you put into place or any sort of maybe report that you receive annually or monthly to make sure that such resources are benefiting all the youth within regions? Okay, thank you.
Monitoring and evaluation, very important question.
My name is still very Ndorokaze, a graduate. The first was from 2007. So we are the one who made sure that you are still having a program. Anyway, I have a question. No, I have only comments because question will not help. Two. One, the Ministry of Youth is taking up the budget of NYC. Because number one, you have the credit use scheme. The ministry have a credit use scheme at the ministry's head office. Common sense will prevail with that. Either just give that flat money to NYC so that they can operate on that thing. I think that's one of the things. Maybe the minister is watching. Please do that. That will really make sure that even my comrade there is asking that question. Then you will give more money to those opportunities to those youths who are not getting the money, because now you are giving also the resources are just going to, we are just putting more resources instead of going to where the resources are needed to go. Two, there is a bank called Development Bank of Namibia. I remember very well when I was still a youth. But I'm no more a youth. We made sure, now I'm telling you, George, so that you understand. We made sure that the Ministry of Finance be a guarantor to the DBN, so that when youth come to DBN, I get opportunities to get loans. I guarantee you now they have not gotten 0. And the person who's even leading that bank is also a youth, is younger than me. For God's sake, please speak to them. Speak to them. Where is that guarantee? Where is that guarantee? So that the people can get to that money. Tibet is a very, very important
It was limited to 2 interventions. If I allow you, I must allow everybody else. We'll come back. Be exactly like that.
Sharonice, a senior youth.
Upper
youth. Thank you so much. I think I have a question and a statement. I was wondering if there are collaborations between the Ministry of Poverty Eradication, the Ministry of Youth, and the NYC, because I know, or there ought to be little segments of the budget allocated for youth empowerment. Do you guys collaborate? Do you have a united or a little kiddie bag that you guys have together, like Brian said, instead of allocating the funds in little segments in different areas rather than having one big kiddie bag for all the youth? Second, the next statement was, I think Honorable Max mentioned that in most instances motions are passed but are never carried through. So I just want to urge the youth and the nation at large that to ensure that this motion is carried forth or seen through, it's our prerogative to ensure that when you go vote, you ensure that your voice is represented, and this individual can be there to see it through. You get what I mean? So vote wisely. You don't have to blindly be loyal to whoever your grandmother voted for.
That's even coming now. It's coming soon.
My name is Simon Abdullah. I'm also a former YLDP graduate. With the knowledge I got from
believe I was able to found my NGO that is automatically outreaching. So my question goes to Mr. Maxwell. Knowing that we have a small population in Namibia with more than a lot of political parties, which the youth are becoming victims of these political parties because they are the forefront which have to represent them. We have at least less than 2.5 million people in Namibia. Do you think it's fair enough to ask them all these many political parties? Plus, what role does opposition political parties play? Do they only exist for political party fund allowance? Or are they going to affect policy? Because SWAPO is the leading because I don't understand why, because SWAPO is leading to 2 years, and we have more than 15 political parties. So what role do opposition parties play? The other one goes to Mr. Ndorokaze. This is mostly of the Chinese operations. What role does NAMRA play in Chinese trade and operations? Yeah. Knowing that Chinese don't pay tax, they don't bank, they don't bank in our banks, they don't have warranty and guarantee. When I was a kid, I bought a radio from which I used to broke it out of
First question that was asked, and that was directed to the Honourable Member of Parliament, and I think on this one, Ndorokaze can also add there as legal counsel to just provide context in terms of some of the limitations that come with Article 95.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Elisen Chirera. Dr. Elisen Chirera is my former lecturer of urban sociology at the University of Namibia, so I don't know why he's dragging me here. I think first it's important to contextualize this whole thing of the state of emergency in terms of the motion. And just to break it down as to why we are calling for a state of emergency, and perhaps explain what is the state of emergency in terms of our laws, and Mr. Ndorokaze will also perhaps touch on it later. Chapter 4 of our Constitution deals with public emergencies, state of emergencies, and martial law. Article 26 of the Constitution directs that the President may declare a state of emergency in a time of national disaster or public emergencies. But it doesn't particularly state, outline what is necessarily a state of disaster or public emergency and so forth. There is no particular provision in the Constitution. Having said that, there is a general sentiment in the political world, in academia, and among scholarly works that has been adopted that a state of emergency must only be declared during a time where we can see that there is physical violence in the country. When we are seeing the citizens are out there overthrowing the state, that is when we call for a state of emergency. There must be some sort of evidence that there is violence in the country that threatens the general welfare of the country. But this is not necessarily the case. It is not actually the case in terms of our law. Because a state of emergency can be declared even in those instances where there is no evidence that there is violence or the welfare of the state is about to die. Issues such as youth unemployment, because it is an economic state of emergency in its very essence. And why is it important that we must call a state of emergency for youth unemployment? Because we have seen that in a number of countries across the world, that the youth unemployment question and unemployed youth, frustrated and hungry youth, have been fundamental in overthrowing governments and causing massive social unrest. So before we get there, before we get to the Arab Spring, because the Arab Spring, many people don't know this, the Arab Spring that overthrew Gaddafi, that overthrew, what is the other one of Egypt, George? Mubarak, all those people was predominantly started by an unemployed, frustrated young person. So before we go there, we are saying let us declare a state of emergency around this particular issue. So in terms of declaring a state of emergency, in terms of this motion, we will just be following the particular provisions of the Constitution, which calls for a state of emergency to be called during public emergency and national disasters. And we view the youth unemployment question as a national emergency, as a state of emergency and a national disaster. Because you cannot have over 60% of your unemployed young people who are sitting on the streets, who are frustrated and who are hungry. This causes, this issue, and I wrote an article about it, it presents a massive situation where we find ourselves in social unrest in this country. So, Mr. Dr. Shirera alluded to the fact that what about the funds? How will we be able to address this issue, even if it's declared a state of emergency? The good thing about a state of emergency is that the power is now vested in the state to decisively intervene in matters of the economy. So when we declare a state of emergency, this government is making hundreds of billions of dollars which is not benefiting anyone and who are not giving back, will then be decisively directed by the state to say that, look, Pick n Pay, you are paying your CEO 36 billion a year, you are making a profit excess of 100 billion. 50 billion of that must now go to unemployed young people. The state in that instance will decisively intervene in those instances. So it's not an impractical notion. It's very much doable, and it has been called in a number of countries. I know Nigeria senators were asking for it last week and so forth. So it's a general sentiment around the world that really an emergency, sort of emergency, must be called around the economic question. My brother, in terms of your second question, it's a very difficult question to answer. You know, as a parliamentarian, you are solid. You must defend and protect the Constitution. Chapter 3.
My legal knowledge would be required this evening. I thought it was just my communication responsibilities and the heart and interest that I have for the development of the Namibian chart that will come and play this evening. However, Article 95 is very clear, and what it does really, if you can put it less formal, is really a guide for what the Namibian state and the government of the day should aspire for. Because it states the kind of things that the Namibian state should ensure is in place. All aimed at ensuring that there is a decent livelihood for every Namibian. So it speaks to access to services, it speaks to access to whatever, the exercise of whatever rights and all that. The unfortunate part of it, unlike Chapter 3 of our Constitution, is that when there is a failure in implementing, in ensuring that that is maintained, there is no recourse, a similar recourse that is provided for in Chapter 3 of our Constitution, where you can now go to court to seek redress where there is failure. Unfortunately, that's the difference. So it's a very good guide, and all policies that the government of the day puts across should be anchored around the attainment of the ideals that are stated in Article 95. But whether you can go to court with it to compel the state or the government of the day to provide for the various things that are stated there, the answer then is found in Article 101 of our Constitution, and you can't. So that's where it ends. But like I say, if we were looking at what kind of state, at independence, what kind of state did we envisage ourselves to be as Namibia, 95 is a very good guide. It tells you what are the things that we should strive to attain. So I think, otherwise, if I continue further than this, I'll be charging legal fees. Yes, my brother, the question around the Chinese businesses, and I saw that it drew interest in the House. Therefore, the response is also going to be one that is fitting the interest that it drew. I did make the point in my initial intervention that the space that we operate from would not have regard to what nationality you are. It has regard to compliance and non-compliance. But the point is being made that there is evident non-compliance here. What are you doing? Without having regard to the nationalities and what economic sector it is that the operators are operating from. And here you would have seen that we have already made the concession that compliance levels are not what they should be. I told you with regards to income tax and VAT, the compliance there, especially with income tax, is around 52%, 57%, which is not something that we are proud of. So what is our response to it as the Namibia Revenue Agency? Sometime around March this year,
forced by this sad reality, we were then forced to, not really forced, but as a response, we then derived a compliance and enforcement strategy, which seeks to ensure that we are able to enhance compliance. Now, a compliance and enforcement strategy of that kind is not one that I'm going to speak to this evening, detailing to you what the elements thereof are. That is not an enforcement strategy. I guess we would agree. If I tell you what the elements are, then we are not going to enforce it. Because the people that we say will find them in Orua, by the time we get there, they are already gone, if I was to give you the details. But it's a very sad situation because of the high level of non-compliance that exists. And the kind of businesses that you indicated, of course, as it relates to us, we would want to know what income did you generate for this year? And how do we establish that? We would only be able to establish that if you provide us your books. Now, in some of those businesses, the unfortunate reality there is that those books are not there, which then makes it very difficult for you to establish, as a business, do you qualify to register for VAT? And if you were registering for VAT, what is it that you took from those that bought the one over to the revenue agency or not? So yes, while we admit that there is a serious low level of compliance across the country, and obviously it is higher in certain kinds of businesses, the retail sector is one. We did a study which also shows that the fishing sector might also not be paying the right amount of tax that they should be paying over. And we know who operates in that space. Much of it, the right holders are not foreigners. So, yes, it is a concern, but it's a concern for which a response or a solution would not just be with the Namibia Revenue Agency. For instance, businesses do not register with us. They will be registering with paper. But some of those businesses do not even register. They start trading without registration. So some of those role players also need to come to the fore. But it's a serious concern, and it's one that, as the Namibia Revenue Agency, we are not going to run away from. What we are however cautioning is that we are not going to be party to a conversation that seeks to suggest that there is a certain group of people, nationalities, that we should be going after. And when we go out as a Namibia Revenue Agency, we are going to say we are going to go for these people from Orua. No, we're not going to be part of that. We will not stop people from driving those narratives, but we're obviously not going to be party to that narrative. I don't think that's the kind of Namibia that we want to see. We're definitely not going to be party to that. But where there is non-compliance, we say, yes, there is a need for us to enhance compliance so that we are able to collect. But also, possibly because we are a new agency, and we know that non-compliance is in many areas, what we're getting is that people would want to tell you that, no, don't focus here. You have not dealt with X, Y, and Z. Deal with X, Y, and Z. When we see that you are done with X, Y, and Z, you can come to us. If we subject ourselves to that, what are we going to be? So it's the unfortunate fact that while we might not be doing things at the pace and speed that people would want us to do them, we recognize that there is a problem. Compliance is very low, but we are going to ensure that we enhance enforcement, which then translates in greater compliance. I think that suffices the response for now.
Very detailed.
Thank you, Ricardo. I think the first question was related to monitoring and evaluation from my youth leader from the Yarukeekuro region. The National Youth Council has administrative staff that oversees our operations and our undertakings. I think I alluded to in my opening remarks that we are a public institution that receives public funds. By that very same statement, it then goes without saying that we are audited by the Office of the Auditor General because we're a public institution. We therefore pride ourselves as an institution that we've got strong financial management systems in place, overseen by the Finance Department in as far as accountability is concerned, so that for every cent that we send out of the institution to the structures of the council, we are able to get a report for it. But to touch on the M&E of our programs, that then is overseen by the programs department, headed by the programs manager, supported by program coordinators. So for initiatives where we support young people, these are closely linked to our strategic objectives as espoused in our strategic plan. Therefore, it is extremely important to us to monitor the successful implementation or not of these activities that we fund through the institution, because that will also give us a position to see whether we meet our strategic objectives or not, and whether we are still in line with the 5-year plan that we have as an institution, because that would also inform whether we respond to the challenges our young people face. I just wanted to respond to that by my youth leader from the Kunene region. In as far as coordination is concerned, by my honorable who asked, do we collaborate in government? I think that is extremely important as a theme that speaks to exactly that, ensuring that youth development is mainstreamed across government. It speaks to the fact that youth development must not only be the sole responsibility of the Ministry of Sports, Youth and National Service. So we're really happy to have a revised national youth policy that emphasizes and puts young people on the top of government's priority. So that collaboration is there, and I want to give you a few examples of how that collaboration is there, not only in government but also in private sector. Recently, we've celebrated the National Youth Week in Ludovitz, where we focus on agripreneurship as a self-avenue for employment, where we have signed memorandum of understandings with private sector in line with the things that we've celebrated. That really gives us hope as the National Youth Council that private sector is also coming on board in as far as solving the challenges that the Namibian young people are confronted with. In government, the National Youth Council, therefore, will be the first point of entry when they want to appoint young people, for instance, to boards. The National Youth Council will therefore then be requested to indicate which young people we want to send to several boards that we have. The National Youth Council, in as far as government collaboration is concerned, when there's an opportunity to either give funding for special youth programs or allocate young people.
My name is Luigi Pinget. I have a question directed to the chairperson of the country. Directed to the I have a question that is directed to the chairperson of the AFM Church. I come to know that the government, through the Ministry of Youth, has a credit scheme for the young people and NYC as well as one. But both of them are on hold. So my question is, when are these schemes going to be open? When are these credit schemes going to be finalized and open? Because I have a lot of entrepreneurs in our church who want to apply for these schemes, but they've been on hold for a long time.
My name is Chinola. I have a lot to say, so I'll quickly just run into it. My question is directed to NAMRA. So the order with me business industry has been on longer than NAMRA existed. It has been a platform for young people to be able to earn an income in the ever-increasing statistics on unemployment. Now, the reason that events, went out of control after the 10th of May incident was young people have always struggled to procure jobs, and now that order with me was a source of bread and butter, as our moderator explained. I think what NAMRA is forgetting the narrative that was spread was that order with me is a source of income for young people. And burning, those things, even though, like I said, narrative was contrary to what we thought, is a way of showing young people that there is an institution like Chinatown. For years, they have counterfeit products. Yeah. Government has not cared. Yes. But at this time that young people are engaging in this industry, and the more unemployment is increasing, the more, that informal industry is growing. NAMRA has acted very unfriendly towards young people that have gone into this industry, forced by the level of jobs to be able to earn themselves an income. So my question now is, if you go to Chinatown even today, tomorrow, you will see that there are counterfeit goods there. In fact, they even tell you don't take pictures because they know that those things that they're selling are counterfeit. And I think somebody asked the previous question, but it was not answerable in my opinion. And it is that what has NAMRA done to to physically hold Chinatown accountable, even after the uproar, regardless of whether the narrative was right or wrong.
I have to make a statement. Panelist, can you hear me?
Yes, just project a little bit.
Yeah, the first one, I just want to make a statement. The lady has said, let's vote. A famous guy called Joseph Stalin said, elections are not won by those who vote, but those who count the votes. So whatever you do, vote whatever, it won't change anything. So what I want to hear from Mr. Katjimune is that we had we still have it, I don't know, the national housing emergency, if I'm correct. Right? So the first question is that we had that, and the government was not held accountable, right? People went on without housing. The housing crisis was not solved. How do we then hold the government accountable, not only through legislation, because that's only talking in the parliament? Can we go on to another branch of government, maybe to the judiciary, where we can even sue the government for not implementing the emergency? Now the other one is to Mr. Ndorokaze. Don't you think there was a better way to counter the narrative that you mentioned that was, being propelled by the media? Because of Namra to say that, calm down, guys. There's only 10% of order with me, and it came from 20 years ago, 7 years ago. The other one is for Ms. Busch. How many percent of percentage of your capital is invested into IT? In terms of now assisting the kids or the youth that is involved in IT business. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think the only solution for us to solve youth unemployment is for us to introduce a basic income grant for everyone. We invest now in an additional basic income grant for all Namibians from the ages of 0 to 59. This is that we are so unemployed, but then with a basic income grant, it can help us to become more like financially independent. Because imagine getting $1,000 per month from government. That might actually help you start up a business and start up other things. And also, another thing that I wanted to ask for Namra. Ladies and gentlemen, a Chinese national pours urine on a black person, it gets 1,000, right? Amushelalo goes out and says that, guys, we need to stop water in Chinatown. He gets what? Arrested. And today, he's in what? In jail. Chinatown is not paying tax, but they got their own counterfeit goods. Still right now, undone. But as a black person, will you say, guys, order with me? So, now I'm going to refund those things that we paid. Because people pay 3,000 for iPhones. People pay money for those things. Are they going to be refunded? And how do we solve that problem? Because personally, we also know some goods. We want that, but then you think, no, you don't refund that car because you guys made the things. So, how do we hold you down accountable for that? How do we hold you guys accountable for that?
Good evening. My name is Yarukeekuro from the Namibia region and a student at NOST as well. So my question is to Mr. Honorable Katjimune. So we see what you're doing by bringing awareness to the youth unemployment, and as a student, as I mentioned, and as an unemployed youth as well. So my question is, how will the government create jobs if it doesn't build firms, if it doesn't build hospitals, if it doesn't constantly deliver services, if it doesn't expand its departments and state-owned enterprises? The lower the economic development, the lower job creation. Now that's basic economics. The demand for jobs is high, but the supply is low. Meaning there are more people looking for jobs, but there is a shortage of firms and workers to accommodate those people. So by just using demand and supply, I know that politicians are just lying by talking about job creation. So please, Mr. Katjimune, feed me on this. Let me speak.
Thank you. That's 5 contributions for this round. We'll give it to the floor. I would also like to urge our panelists to keep it brief in terms of the responses, so we give a little bit more time to everybody here. One more thing before we get the responses. It's about 3 minutes to 8. We said we're going to be here until 8 o'clock. I just want to get your permission that we put in another 30 or 40 minutes to unpack it. 30 minutes?
That we take time. I thought the explanation that I had tendered was sufficient, but it seems there are things. Is there another response to what I'm saying? But they seem, look, what I can do this evening is to tell you what the position is. What will be left to you is to whether you accept it as a position or not. In the event that you do not accept it, based on the facts that I'm presenting, you can give me or present to this House alternative facts, which speaks or suggests to a different scenario. Now, let me once again deal with the events of the 10th of May. And again, deal with the narratives that are being advanced. Unfortunately, the gentleman who asked the question was wearing white, has probably left the room. I would have wanted to respond to him so that he gets, but everybody else benefits from that. But I'll, in any case, just respond to that. He is saying, look, the order with me operators are not new businesses. So if I tell you that the cutoff time for the things that were destroyed was between 2015 and 2021, those were the goods that were destroyed. It would have also possibly included goods confiscated from people operating from that space, because that is not a new business. I accept the fact that it's not a new business, but I'm putting it to you now to say, if you have evidence to show that amongst the things that were destroyed on the 10th of May were things of people operating in the space of order with me, please present that. But what I can dismiss now without any fear of contradiction is the narrative being advanced to say the target, the main group, was that group. And I'm saying to you now that that is flawed. And then there is an issue, the things that you banned on the 10th of May. What we did on the 10th of May, in fact, leading to the 10th of May, we invited the media and we told them that we are going to carry out a distraction on the 10th of May. And this invitation went out on the 9th of May. The idea was that so that it is down in the open and everybody is able to see, who cares to see, how it is done. I can tell you now, nothing was banned on the 10th of May. The distraction method that was used there was different from banning. I know the unfortunate part was that there are certain media houses who did not attend the actual distraction. All they did was, referring to this operation, they went to their file materials. And in the pictures, you would be seeing things that are burning. There was no fire on that day. I could have told you what is the method that was used for distraction. The danger with that is that sometimes when you do so, when you reveal that, they say, because they could be people who are interested in recovering some of the materials that were destroyed, they will still want to take their chances and see, or if it was not bad, then maybe it might be there. So as much as I'm tempted, I would refrain from saying what was the method, but I can tell you now, there was no fire on that day burning these things. Chinatown, and the narrative is, bluntly put, you are afraid of Chinatown. If you don't go there. Yeah. Now the facts do not support that either. Because amongst the things that were destroyed on the 10th of May were goods seized, confiscated from Chinatown. If you just do a simple, if you just do when you answer a question, allow yourself to also hear the response. You have your right to differ, but at least allow yourself to hear the response. If you do a simple Google search, you would see that we have done several operations under the Directorate of Customs and Excise, but together with other law enforcement agencies. Previous operations at Chinatown, amongst others,
2015, 2019. And remember the period that I'm referring to. So the narrative around Chinatown was fed. It's also fatally flawed. But like I told you, as an entity, as a national entity, we do not want to get to that discussion where we're discussing markets and nationalities. No, we're discussing compliance and non-compliance. Already I've made the concession that the compliance level is not at a point where it should be. Our response, we were almost mum on this issue. I don't know what is that supported by. After the operation was done, it was us, as the Namibia Revenue Agency, who released a statement indicating that this operation was carried out. Why did we do so? Besides telling you that we have destroyed goods kept in our warehouses for this period to this value, there was a need for us to put out an educative message out. One, to say, in terms of our law, counterfeit products are prohibited and they should not be allowed into the country. I'll in a moment speak to that now. So that's what we did. And we did that on the 10th of May. On the 13th of May, which would be the Friday of that week, we issued a subsequent statement, of course, responding now to the narratives that were being advanced. There is no media house in this country that between myself and the commissioner, we have not spoken to in the last 4 weeks regarding those issues. So I don't know what supports the fact that we have been silent on it. But in addition to that, on the 17th of May, we had an open stakeholders engagement in Hobabes, which was open, but also, of course, for those in that area, but also open for everybody because we were streaming it live. We did not end there. On the 14th of June, we also had an open stakeholders engagement here in Vendo, which was open to anything, discussion related to anything that we have done. So I would not agree with the notion that we've been quiet about it. We have been talking about it. What, however, I suspect has happened is that people were not agreeing with the things that we have put it forward, and that is within their right. Our obligation will be to explain our position as a public entity, and I think we discharged that without any fear. There was an issue around Chinatown, I think that is captured by what I have already indicated there. My brother with the green mask, as it was being said, when people were asking for you to be given a chance to speak, you are saying you lost your goods that you ordered. And I'm assuming you ordered these things last year. Because it couldn't have been this year and be part of those that were destroyed. I can now tell you, unfortunately, because of the narrative that was advanced, there would have been people who would have taken orders from people in respect of the things that they were saying they were going to provide. Now, with this whole narrative that NAMRA has banned all our things, instead of procuring or acquiring these things, what they would go and do to the clients is to say, those things are no longer coming. NAMRA has taken those things, and you saw, they banned all those things. That is an opportunity. Unfortunately, people saw that as an opportunity and utilized it. Unfortunately, and unfairly, and unlawfully so. That is what happened. But if you would have ordered anything this year and you were expecting to get your stock, and you did not get it, and people are telling you that it was confiscated by NAMRA, and it was banned or destroyed on the 10th of May, I can tell you now that is not true. Now, I think the principal question that we should be talking about is the treatment of counterfeit goods. Yes. What is a counterfeit good? A counterfeit good would be a production of a good or a brand by somebody else who is not the brand right holder without the authorization of the brand right holder. And in terms of our law, that is unlawful, and such goods may not be brought in the country. Are we saying as a state we should be amending the laws to allow for counterfeit goods to be produced? Remember, counterfeit goods does not only apply to foreign produced goods. There are people in this country who have got brands to which they have got rights to. Are we saying we should allow anybody who wakes up on any day to also counterfeit those brands, pirate their music, pirate whatever they're doing? Is that what we are advancing for? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to be brief in terms of the first question. There is a saying that goes that people deserve the government they vote for. Yes. So, there are numerous instruments in the state to hold the government accountable. You can go to the courts, which is a very costly and lengthy matter. And AR took government to court for the 200,000 plots that were promised, and they're still in court today. It's going to drag on for 3 or 4 more years. But the implementation stage, you realize, hey, this thing that I was speaking, how am I going to do it? So let me be a bit of an academic for now, and explain on how we can holistically address this youth unemployment crisis in conjunction with other interventions that we're calling for. We know that the youth unemployment crisis in Namibia and the unemployment crisis in general is based on a three-legged problem. Firstly, we know that since 2016, the economy has not been growing. We went into recession in 2016. In 2017, the Yarukeekuro administration put austerity measures. So government now has freeze jobs. There is no more money going to the private sector due to tenders. So the whole economy is not producing jobs at any level. So that's the first problem we have to address. The economy is not growing. We don't know when it's going to pick up again. So that is the first problem. The second problem is in terms of our education system since 1990. We knew that our education system was releasing students from grade 10 and grade 12 on a massive scale. And we don't know where these people went to. Hundreds and thousands of people were failing grade 10 and grade 12 throughout from 1990 until now. We don't know where these people went to. They did not have any skills. They did not have any education whatsoever. Where did they go to? And that is why we have a massive unemployment crisis today. And that is why, in terms of solving the crisis, we must actually also address our education system, which throws people out in grade 10, now I guess it's grade 11, and grade 12, without any skills and without any education, without any recourse. This thing is actually contributing to our unemployment crisis in a massive scale. And the third and last problem that we do find in terms of the youth unemployment crisis is that even those that do go to university and are able to graduate are not able to find jobs at all. A few years ago, government was telling us we need veterinarians. We need, what is this school at Sub Numa campus? Fish aquatics, aquaculture. We need engineers, but let me tell you guys, the first graduates of veterinary medicine would not find jobs. In fact, they had to come to our office because I was working in the office of the leader of Officer of at that time, to say, Honorable Yonani, can you help us? We have graduated, government said we are priority fields. But we have now graduated, there's no jobs.
They've taken the key.
Yeah, so so the crisis is constituted in those three-legged approaches. Firstly, we have to grow the economy. Secondly, we have to stop pushing people out on a mass scale out of the education system without any skills and without any recourse. And thirdly, for those that go to university, we must be able to actually ensure that they do get jobs after graduation. Otherwise, we're just wasting each other's time. But let us continue the conversation.
Just to respond to the youth from the AFM youth organization that asked, what are we doing about the credit for youth in business and the National Youth Credit Scheme by the ministry? The reason why that program is on hold is because we're doing an impact assessment by the two institutions. Through this impact assessment, we want to establish what were our successes, what were our challenges, to ensure that when we also continue further to outgrow this program, we want to address the challenges as was raised by Brian earlier, in as far as avoiding duplication. Through this impact assessment, we want to then determine who is going to continue running this program, so that it's not split between two institutions. And this impact assessment, therefore, then is something that we are relying on to either inform us whether it's the council or the ministry that will continue with it, how to expand with it in line with the contemporary challenges that young entrepreneurs are facing. So it's a program that's not completely eliminated or put aside. It's a program that is in review through an impact assessment so that we can position and better align ourselves as government. Ricardo, briefly, I just want to remark on what has been said with regards to youth unemployment. I want also just to highlight some of what government is currently busy with through the State of the Nation Address. I think, colleagues, that is very important because through the President's State of the Nation Address, he then gives a policy direction of what the year will look like, which is the current year, which we are finding ourselves in as young people. I think it's very important, and we must applaud government, that government today is busy with an informal economy, start-up and entrepreneurship national policy. What this will do then, it will regulate and create a conducive environment for our informal traders that operate in the SME space. And I think, Honorable Max, this is an initiative that is laudable because that's the head of state also announced that the government, through the Public Procurement Code of Good Practice, through the Ministry of Finance, would want to allocate preferential treatment and reservation of youth-owned businesses for contracts valued at 50 million or less. Again, government then wants to ensure that even through public procurement, young people get preferential treatment because clearly, colleagues, the demographics inform that young people must be placed at the priority of government's national agenda setting. Further to that, President Gengov has also declared during his State of the Nation address that he is giving the colleagues at our students at NASFAF amnesty. That is laudable. We know the issues of NASFAF. Colleagues, we know that the challenges of NASFAF is not foreign to us because we are students that are from that program as well. To get that amnesty of the interest that you will not be paying is something that is laudable and is something that we must acknowledge. And then finally, I also then just want to inform that the government also this year, through the Environmental Investment Fund, has also put aside 2 million that is earmarked for green schemes. So in as much as there's challenges, I think it's important to acknowledge also what is currently in place for us as young people to have mobility, for us as young people to have better agency. Sorry, Mr. Moderator, that I've deviated slightly from the question that I want to say.
How many people have access to it? And it was very shocking that we actually found out that a lot of young people do not know, even in the private sector spaces and so forth, what are some of the available stuff. For example, AgriBank, the Women and Youth Agriculture Program that they rolled out, where you don't need any collateral. If you have a degree, 2 of you can come together, the one that has a degree in agriculture, another one in business, they'll give you 3 million, I think it's 3 million up until 50 million for farms, etc., appliances and so forth. I think the DBN ran something similar. I think recently, 2 commercial banks also announced 60% FNB and Standard Bank are participating. They're getting guarantees directly from the government. Yeah, so there were some of these facilities that were available in the ecosystem, but were not communicated properly. I think that's also one of the problems. So as we're talking about and responding to this, let's also have that reflection. If there are people here, I see there are 1 or 2 folks that are working for some of those institutions, please feel free to have some interventions there as well.
I think my question, I would like to say, we were told in the beginning that it's supposed to be a non-political, but I can see the maneuver system here to the anti-so-called government. I'm not going to entertain it, but I'm going to say the solution to the Namibian problems and to the youth problems does not relate in the change of political parties, but it relates to the change of the mindset of us, the young people. My number 1 point will be in accordance with Article 10 of the Namibian Constitution, that we are supposed to treat everybody equally. Now we have a situation among us, the youth, especially those now that are in this house, that those that cut the wings of others will blame others for not flying. Why am I saying this? We have got people that are representing the agenda of young people in high offices, but instead of them to make the policies and regulations poor people or poor young people friendly, they drive to the location, to Ahdiland, to Havana, to Stop and Shop, and change away the people that, or the young people that are trying to make a living, and try to cap or to narrow the gap of youth unemployment in the country. But they were in offices, capacitated, given power, mandate, authority in them to make sure that the policies and the formulation of policies have changed to make sure that those people can make a living and not to fraud the government and say, give us a job. Because I'm sure not everyone is going to be employed by the government. So I'm in short saying, let the young people that are representing us in offices, especially the seat of Windhoek, and then most of them that are having, let the young people, or at least try to make sure that the line of climbing the ladder to get licenses to sell in seat of Windhoek or make some informal businesses is easy for poor people, especially in informal areas. My number two point is that we are Article 147 of the Namibian Constitution to say if the laws, especially our legislators, our young parliamentarians, if the laws are not poor young people friendly, repeal them.
Can you give the gentleman a better round of applause?
What is today's level of revenue collection that you have inherited from the previous ministry department, to which we would have to hold you accountable, or maybe have hope that now that we have NAMRA, there will be an increase in that revenue collection in what could be possibly the latter that you have put for yourself for that. Okay, so that we can maybe, after a term, we say, no, we need you or we do not need you again. Honorable, you have mentioned the state of emergency is one way to deal with youth unemployment. But currently, the law allows for a period of 6 months to be declared by the president, and maybe after then go to the parliament to possibly extend. I'm trying to get the interventions, the possible interventions that would be long-term solution to youth employment within the period given by that suggestion.
If the motion is successful.
If the motion is successful. Because the example that we are given is to get maybe money from those companies that are making too much money now. Would that be a long-term solution for youth employment? The statement, young leaders, young MPs, you have the Youth Act in which includes the youth fund. The youth fund that has to come with the National Youth Council Act. If you want to organize an Arab Spring that would maybe a Namibian Spring, please try and organize a spring that will compel the government to put money into that obligatory youth fund that is in the act.
My question really is around the issue of the NYC. Everyone of us living this place today, at least we must live with solutions about unemployment. Because now it's just an issue of back and forth of what already is happening. So my task to the NYC is that I think the reason why a number of businesses are failing and leading to a lot of young people being unemployed is because the economic dynamics are not conducive enough. In terms of a friendly economic that allows local companies to fairly compete with multinationals. I think this has now to do with the issue around our importing of stuff. I think we need to be regulated somewhere there. Like I think we need to focus our dynamics towards there because currently I don't think we lack the skills or the funding. The funding is there, but you get a business that gets the funding but will not last even for 3 years because the market is not conducive enough at all. So we need to change the dynamics in order for the government to regulate the economic space whereby we know that if we provide funding for our youth, we know that they can succeed into the market because currently we are just wasting money. We are funding a business that we know is not going to make it because we know ShopRite is going to beat out the Tebulu's home shop. We know that for sure. So we need to change the dynamics from only focusing, we need to enable our youth with skills and funding. Skills and funding, yes, we need that, but also the market where we want to send these people needs to be conducive. That's all. Thank you very much.
My republic was started by Ali and partners. You know, it was so sad to see. That was a local shop for Patrick. It was so sad to see how on Twitter and social media we were tearing this into pieces. Why is this shirt 400? Why is this 300? But mind you, we are the same people that will walk into Edmonds and pay $800 for a shirt. Yes. Oh, that shit. The other example I want to make is, if that one is too far, when your colleagues come and sell, the order will be stuff, right? You will take out a shirt, the person will say, no, this is a polo shirt. You'll take a shirt, you'll do this. I said, look at it. That's the mentality of the Namibians. Yeah. As they are to stretch it a bit. Is this a real polo? Oh, actually, I don't know. But yeah, okay, how much is it? 350? No, okay, can I give you 100 every month? The person will take the thing on those terms. But that is also the behavior change that we need to start with as Namibians. We live in a very formalized economy. You know, when I stayed in Ivory Coast for about 8 months, all my groceries, we bought food along the side of the street. But here,
I just have suggestions. First suggestion is going to Namra. Namra, what education, first I have to ask you, what education that you give to the nation about the platforms and the guidance on how to import and order the equipment, rather than just to destroy the equipment and their orders. And I think you need to come up with a program which is giving people information how to order, what are the strategies that you need to go through, so that they cannot find themselves in the difficulty that you brought to them. And the other suggestion is going to National Youth Council. Please come up with a youth entrepreneurs programs, which is engaging youth with business mentors and business coachings. within Namibia and countrywide, and worldwide. Because we have a brilliant youth within rural area who want to come up with a business which can boost up our GDP. But the problem is only the information. They are not access to information. They are not access to right people that can boost them up so that their business can come on board. Please come up with this program, and I want this program to start next year. Yes, this is the best way to empower you in terms of entrepreneurs. Please let us engage with those successful people in America. How can we engage them? We'll get through you. Please, let's program come on board. Next year, I want to back you.
Level of revenue collection that we probably aspire.
What are targets? Are you able to meet the targets? Will you be better than the department? I think that's the class.
Most certainly, we will be better than the departments, the two departments going forward. Obviously, the reality is that there are certain efficiencies that we need to get into our processes, and as well as our systems. But definitely, the indications are that we are going to do better than the department. Hence, in fact, hence the creation of the entity. To give you just as an indication, for the past financial year, that would be 21-22, the target there, the revenue target as far as we're concerned was $49.4 billion that we're supposed to collect. At the end of that financial year, we collected $52.9 billion. So we had exceeded the target by about $3.5 billion. Now, this is a milestone achieved while we have not implemented any of the things that we intend to do. For instance, we have not even gotten real underway with regards to the recruitment process. Because at the moment, we need to absorb the staff that was previously with those two departments into our fold as employees of the Namibia Revenue Agency. But they are performing that function so well, even when there is uncertainty around where they're going to be tomorrow in relation to their jobs. I spoke to you about the enforcement and compliance strategy that we have just approved and now are busy implementing. And as a result of that, in part, you would have also seen the report that we indicated around the bribery attempt in relation to one of our officials. It was as a result of this enforcement steps that we have taken, remind us to say, but you're not compliant. And I guess those reminders led to somebody to think that to make the problem go away, maybe I should pay the official and I will not be hearing from them anymore. So yes, there are those activities that we are undertaking that we then hope that they will translate in certain efficiencies within our processes and systems. The target is normally determined by the Minister of Finance as he then sets the fiscal position of the government, and we get it from there. But in terms of our strategic plan, obviously there are indicative figures to which we are working towards. And then whether we have a platform where we educate around imports and exports requirements related to that, yes, there are. In fact, the session that I referred to that we had on the 14th of June here in Windhoek, and it's available on our Facebook platform because we're streaming it live, you can still get it. We detailed those processes, for instance, in respect of the importation of second-hand vehicles or even second-hand clothes, which is now a market that is really growing. You see people importing these bales, and even there in that process, when people try to avoid importing them at the rightful and lawful entry points, they are left then at the devices and the disposal of smugglers. And what they would do is that to get the bale from where it is imported from to Windhoek, they would have paid many other people in the process because it's a process that is done in the dark, that there is no justice to that, and they are exposed to so many things. In the end, they are forced to sell those bills at prices that they might not even have buyers for those goods. But had they, for instance, paid what they are supposed to be paying at entry point, for instance, a bale would weigh around 45 or so kilograms. If you were to pay customs duty to get it out, it would probably cost you anything closer to 1,000. Now, people would not do that. In some instances, they would get somebody to smuggle the kit for them just across from the Angolan border into our border. They would have already paid around 500 or so. And now the destination is, for instance, Venlo or the coast. Even to get past Oshigelo, somehow that system, that network, has also created another stoppage. And they would need to part with some funds. At the end of the day, what they would have paid just to get their thing here, and even when it gets here, there are also elements that they would collude with, so that before they can take possession of this, they would also have to part with some of, give or take, they would have paid around 2,000 as opposed to the 1,000 that they would have paid at the points. So those are all the educations that we are extending. And like I indicated, if you go to our Facebook page, you'll find that you'll be able to get what the requirements are. Moderator, agreeing to come here, I was, besides coming to obviously, there we have also recognized already that there is a problem with young people, especially those that remain at the village, while some of us are here in the cities. And we are looking at how do we assist them. And one thing that we have decided is to say, I think the best tool that you can give them is ensuring that they are skilled, to upskill them. At the moment now, we're looking at what are those, obviously we cannot take many because this is a voluntary thing that we're doing that alone. But we're looking at what are those programs and what kind of skills can you give them so that they are able to start doing certain projects on their own. And I must say I've done maybe not a good search at the moment, but I've not been able to come across programs that one can say these are suited for this. And once these guys have got the skills, they can be able to give themselves a livelihood. And that could vary from a gardening project. Many of them are farmers in their own rights, but they are obviously not doing farming the way they should be doing. There could be so many other things that they could be producing. I was hoping that I would be benefiting a great deal from that, but it's not all lost because I think the discussion just told us that there are those for whom we can create employment and we should spare no effort to do so. But there are others maybe that the employment sector cannot absorb. Where they are, they should also be assisted so that they can contribute for themselves, but also for the overall of our economy. And I thought I should say that.
But youth must be the creators of jobs and not job seekers. It has been repeated by him numerous times and also our Minister of Youth that no, we are not God, please go create your own jobs. But when you analyze these things very academically, very systemically, you will find that that particular narrative does not fit in the Namibian context in terms of our economic history and particular dynamics. We are a market of 2 million people. We are a market of 2 million people. So there is no way that in terms of our dynamics, what I'm trying to say is there is only so many businesses that can be created in this economy. And there was a study done by our station that was done that many of these business loans that we're giving to these young people and so forth, they're actually failing. And in 2 or 3 years, this young person is running out of money, is back to the streets. That shows that this narrative that you're now advancing, that you must all be creators of business, does not apply to the Namibian context. Because there's only so many businesses you can create for a population of 2 million. There's not enough buying power. This is not Lagos where there's 50 million people. We're only 300,000 in Windhoek. So there's no market. So in as much as you support the narrative that yes, youth must be the enablers of jobs, not job creators, you can only rely on that particular intervention so much. And that the issue is actually much more systemic and it's bigger than just relying on that. So, Chairperson, going forward, please look into this particular narrative that we've adopted, that must just be giving money out to young people to start jobs and so forth. Mr. Eleni, thank you very much for the question. I don't know whether you're saying there must be a short-term solution or a long-term solution.
Long-term. The question was, what are the strategies that you're planning on adopting during the state of emergency, if you do get that state of emergency?
Yeah, no, that one I explained it quite comprehensively earlier. Because what we say is that the state of emergency, it gives power to the state to intervene decisively in matters of the economy. You remember that the state in Namibia and South Africa, sometimes we develop very progressive. The Swapa government, ANC government, sometimes comes up with very progressive measures and says that no, we must allocate 100 million right now to particular segments of the population. But because there is no state of emergency, people then go to court and say that no, this is unconstitutional. We don't do that. But that 100 million was actually going to uplift many people out of poverty. So what the state of emergency does in case of youth unemployment is that it will give the state that particular power to intervene decisively and say that this particular government, you are making excess resources that can go to other segments of the population, which you would not have ordinarily done if there was no state of emergency. So those are the particular issues that we are saying will happen in a state of emergency.
But even if you get $1 billion, that's
Thank you, Ricardo. I think I know some of the comments that have been made by the youth leaders here tonight, in as far as ensuring that there's protection for domestic youth enterprises especially, and ensuring that we prioritize growth at home as well. I appreciate that. Ricardo, perhaps my concluding remark is that we must be proud of also how far we have come, not only as young people, but also as a country. I think, colleagues, that tonight you have an indication that there's a strong political will to put the youth agenda as a government priority. I mean, it is testament through the appointment, it is testament through our representation. Tonight you have a young MP that is amongst our midst, speaking to you at a very young age, Honourable Max. Not only yourself, but for the first time in the history of the country, we have a parliament that is starting to reflect our demographics as a country, where you have young voices in parliament able to speak on our behalf. You have a young deputy minister, the youngest on the continent, that is also a youth that should and must represent the youth agenda at an executive level in as far as cabinet. You have a youth advisor, the first of its kind on the continent, appointed by President Geingob. That demonstrates his commitment to the young people. I myself, as an executive chair of the National Youth Council, 32 years old, is a young person. So it is very evident that spaces are opening up for young people, and we are occupying them diligently. I don't think all is lost. I then therefore also want to encourage that, yes, we are confronted with a lot of challenges as young people. But we as young people too need to be part of the solution, because these issues do not discriminate. Youth unemployment does not ask which political party you are from. It does not ask what is the color of your skin. It does not ask what is the situation at home. It affects us all, and therefore it is very important that we do not mix politics with the issues that affect young people. That we address it with the seriousness it deserves, and that we also ensure it comes from a place of nationalism. Because that youth agenda then must unite us as young people, regardless of the political affiliation that we have. And I think as National Youth Council, we take that task very seriously, to ensure that beyond this conversation, beyond coming together, discussing issues that affect us, it is our single duty as NYC to ensure that we start defining what the youth agenda of the National Youth Council is, and that we lead it as an institution created by government. And finally, my final encouragement to the Namibian young people is, let us remain optimistic about the future. I know it may seem very difficult, because we are confronted with situations that have been worsened by the pandemic. Government has made gains that the pandemic, that invisible hand, has taken back from us. But as Namibians, true to how we are characterized, that we are the land of the brave, we have emerged resilient, we have emerged stronger. Therefore, tonight, my encouragement is that let us come together. We have youth unemployment, but I also know Namibian youth are smart. We are innovative. We are the ones that must ensure that the issues that we are confronted with, we can solve as colleagues, as young people. And therefore, Mr. Moderator, it has been my extreme pleasure to have been part of this panel alongside our young MP that has recently been sworn in, alongside my colleague from NAMRA that has been in the media recently because of that matter that affected us deeply. But above and beyond that, I really want to conclude to say or to reiterate what the President normally says. Namibia is the only place that we can call home. So let us guard our country jealously. Let us make sure that beyond the challenges that we have now, we can always pride ourselves to say that this is our country, and as young people we are ready to lead, and we are ready to solve the challenges that we are confronted with. Thank you very much.
Let me call Mr. George Kambala, the EXCO member of YLDP-Alumni, to just give us very brief closing remarks. Round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. Yes, the theme today was participation of the unemployed youth in the Namibian economic development. It's a topic that's very dear to us as a normal association. We constantly have all these debates to ensure that our policy makers participate and for them to be informed ideas on how to solve these issues. My takeaway is that one thing that I would like to disagree with Max is that on the issue of an economy, that our economy is only 2 million people. I remember that as a country we have recently ratified the African Free Trade Agreement that gives access to Namibians access to almost $1 billion economy. So now, example, the time is no longer saying that we can no longer keep on saying that there's no economy or market. There's now a free trade agreement that enables you to access Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, at the most basic form of entry. Secondly, is the issue on the fiscal policy that we have. That the fiscal policy is very much clear in terms of enabling, in terms of where the opposite should be. But the problem is also that there's not the environment that we are in order to enable those stats. So with us that we're saying that let's try and find strategies on how to create a more enabling environment for young people to flourish, and also for us young people is that if we see that, for example, I need to go to the state is not giving me enough, or in terms of access, let's create our own platforms. Let's also create our own platforms where we're able to say, look, if I can't go through that door, let me create my own door, or just bulldoze a damn door. So that, colleagues, with that said, colleagues, thank you very much, Ricardo, for hosting this brilliant moderating the session. Mr. Stephen, I can't say your second because I'll just break it. Max and Sharonice, thank you very much for coming here and sharing us your few notes. With that said, colleagues, thank you very much for attending. Please do go on our platforms, keep on sharing the hashtags, and let the conversation continue beyond these 4 walls. And please, I hope everybody signed the attendance register so that you get your contact information. So when we have another engagement, we don't need to call you on WhatsApp, so you just have to go into your emails. So that's it, colleagues. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.